Hey guys, it's reading day, and I'm going to be reading from the Book of Werewolves, a book written in the 1800s. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Just kick myself out. Hang on. Hey guys, welcome. Happy Sunday. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you think you have a paranormal need, we can get to you. It might take us a couple days, but we can definitely get to you. And in the case it does take us a couple days, we do have mediums on staff who can phone you and talk to you about what may or may not be going on. And in most cases, if it is something paranormal, they can calm the energy down and take care of that until we can get out there. Okay. Welcome TikTok. I'm glad you guys are here today. I'm broadcasting today on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. Just a quick warning on TikTok is that, and also for you guys over there at the other side, I have my air conditioner on through my window, so you're going to hear a lot of noise in the background. I apologize for that. It is 105 outside today. And I am on the west side of the house, so if once I turn my AC off to do the show, it gets really hot really quickly here. So I decided to leave it on today. I apologize for the background. I see you guys coming up on the screen of TikTok. Thank you. I cannot read your comments. Can't see that far, but I really appreciate you all. Now, that being said, if you are listening from Facebook, and a lot of you are, feel free to hit that follow button if you like what you see here today. Same thing with YouTube. Same thing with Twitch. Just feel free to hit that subscribe button. I would appreciate. And if you do like what you hear today, leave me a happy face. Leave me a thumbs up. Leave me a heart or two. Just to let me know that you care today. All right. I do have a ticker running at the bottom, just like I do have Knight's Helm running over on TikTok. That's to help me pay the bills and to make sure that I can keep the show on the air. I just appreciate all expenses go towards the show. It doesn't go to me. It just goes towards the show. So I do have my PayPal and my Venmo over there, just like with TikTok. If you go to my profile, you will find the Venmo and PayPal as well. There are 9 helms over. I've got 100 gold for 9 helms today. Again, this is just to keep my show on the air. We broadcast Sunday through Friday, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Sunday is the only day we go a half hour early. So you can find us, or the normal show, you can find us at youtube.com/@California Haunts Radio. Okay, that being said, today is a special day. It's Sunday, and I started this tradition back a couple of years ago with the show, in that I read from a paranormal themed book. Now, when I read from maybe a true ghost story, or it could be a not so true ghost story, or it could be a legend, like werewolves, right? Do werewolves exist? I don't know. I have no idea. But this is an excellent book. It's written by Baring-Gould. It was written in the mid-1800s, and it's one of the best books I've ever seen about werewolves. The other thing to give you background is I found this book purely by accident. My friend and I were watching Little House on the Prairie one day, and the teacher on Little House on the Prairie introduced this book to her students. And I thought, okay, maybe it's a prop book. So I looked it up, and of course, I found the book. So that's kind of cool. So that's what we're reading on the air. I'm reading part 6 of this book, and I think we have at least another 2 Sundays left of it, and then we'll be moving on to something else. Feel free amongst yourselves over on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch to chat amongst yourselves in the chat room. I will be reading those as well. I'll try to read the ones that are coming up on TikTok too. But please feel free to read or to chat amongst yourselves, and that'll help us with the FYP, which is the For You page, and that means that they take a look at us and they distribute us out to more people. Isn't this about sharing? Right? It's all about sharing and getting the word out about these shows. And TikTok, if you could help me out with that, I'd appreciate it too. I do have allergies, which is why I'm doing it. Okay, so I'm going to read for about an hour out of this werewolf book. And to do a quick recap, if I can remember directly, it's been a long week, I'm still sweating, and I was walking down my hallway. To do a quick recap on this, we're looking at different mental things that might cause people to think that they're werewolves. And there's this particular gentleman that I believe unalived a bunch of children, and he ended up going to trial. And so we're now going to talk about the trial. So please bear with me. And again, this was written in the mid-1800s, so the woke times and all that are kind of shaky. So I'll do my best while I'm reading to clean it up and make it more livable for our day and age. But it's the best I can do. I'd also like to go for 1,000 likes over on TikTok. So if you could double tap that screen while I'm reading, that would be great. Show me some love. Show me some love. You're not required to contribute to the Night's Helms, but I really would appreciate it, just like you guys with donations over off the other places. I would appreciate it, because we are just trying to keep everything going and on the air. All right, so if you like it, if you like what you hear and see today, double tap that screen, show me some likes over here, and away we go. All right, so it's a continuation of last week. I do not read foreign languages, nor do I read Roman numerals. And again, for you guys just coming in over on TikTok, I apologize for the background noise, but it's just so miserably hot that if I were to turn my air conditioner off, it would get so hot so fast here, because there's no shade back there. All right, so please double tap that screen. We're going for 1,000 likes today, and some night helms. And if you feel up to it, you've been coming to the show every Sunday, hit that subscribe button over TikTok too. I got subscriptions set up. Okay, so here we go. On the 10th October, Nicolas Chateau, notary of the Duke, went to Chateau de Buffet to read to the prisoner summons to appear in person on the morrow before Messieurs de la Hospital, President of Brittany, Seneschal of Reims, and Chief Justice of the Duchy of Brittany. Now remember, some of these are in French, some of these are in German. Just bear with me. It's kind of funny. The Sire de Retz, who believes himself already a novice in the Carmelite order, had dressed in white and was engaged in singing litanies. When the summons had been read, he ordered a page to give the notary wine and cake, and then he returned to his prayers with every appearance of compunction and piety. On the morrow, Jean l'Abbé and 4 soldiers conducted him to the Hall of Justice. He asked for Pontou and Henriette to accompany him, but this was not permitted. He was adorned with all his military insignia, as though to impose on his judges. He had around his neck massive chains of gold and several collars of knightly orders. His costume, with the exception of his purpoint, was white, in token of his repentance. And please remember that since this book was written in the mid-1800s, there is no copyright on it. You guys can go to the Gutenberg project and find thousands and thousands of books that have been transcribed into ebooks, and they're all free. They're all free of charge. Okay? Double tap that screen if you like what you see in here. I'm going to be reading for an hour. Where was I? His purpoint was of pearl gray silk, studded with gold stars and girded around his waist by a scarlet belt, from which dangled a poniard in scarlet velvet sheaths. His collar, cuffs, and the edging of his purpoint were of white ermine. His little round cap or chapel was white, surrounded with a belt of ermine, a fur which only the great feudal lords of Brittany had a right to wear. All the rest of his dress, to the shoes, which were long and pointed, was white. No one at a first glance would have thought that Sire de Retz to be by nature so cruel and vicious as he was supposed to be. On the contrary, I'm going to turn up the sound here, guys. I'm going to turn them up, okay? Okay. On the contrary, his physiognomy, was calm and phlegmatic, somewhat pale, and expressive of melancholy. His hair and mustache were light brown, and his beard was clipped to a point. This beard, which resembled no other beard, was black, but under certain lights it assumed a blue hue, and it was this peculiarity which obtained for the Sire de Retz the surname of Bluebeard, a name which is attached to him in popular romance, at the same time that this story has undergone strange metamorphoses. But on closer examination of the countenance of Giles, de Retz, contraction in the muscles of the face, nervous quivering of the mouth, spasmodic twitchings of the brows, and above all, the sinister expression of the eyes, showed that there was something strange and frightful in the man. At intervals, he ground his teeth like a wild beast preparing to dash upon his prey, and then his lips became so contracted, as they were drawn in and glued, as it were, to his teeth, that their very color was indiscernible. At times also his eyes became fixed, and the pupils dilated to such an extent, with the somber fire quivering in them, that the iris seemed to fill the whole orbit, which became circular, and sank back into the head. At these moments his complexion became livid and cadaverous. His brow, especially just over the nose, was covered with deep wrinkles, and his beard appeared to bristle, and to assume its bluish hues. But after a few moments, his features became again serene, with a sweet smile reposing upon them, and his expression relaxed into a vague and tender melancholy. Messieurs, he said, saluting the judges, I pray you to expedite my matter and dispatch as speedily as possible my unfortunate case, for I am peculiarly anxious to consecrate myself to the service of God, who has pardoned my great sins. I shall not fail, I assure you, to endow several of the churches in Nantes, and I shall distribute the greater portion of my goods among the poor, to secure the salvation of my soul. Monseigneur, replied bravely Pierre de Hospital, it is always well to think of the salvation of one's soul, but, if you please, think now that we are concerned with the salvation of your body. I have confessed to the Father Superior of the Carmelites, replied the Marshal with tranquility, and through his absolution I have been able to communicate. I am therefore guiltless and purified. Man's justice is not in common with that of God, Monseigneur, and I cannot tell you what will be your sentence. Be ready to make your defense, and listen to the charges brought against you, which M. le Lieutenant de Procureur de la Nantes will read. The officer rose and read the following papers of charges, which I shall condense. Having heard the bitter complaints of several of the inhabitants of the diocese of Nantes, whose names follow hereinafter, this will be fine, here to follow the names of the parents of lost children, we, Philippe Dulivron, Lieutenant Assessor of the Monsieur le Procureur de Nantes, have invited and do invite the very noble and very wise Monsieur Pierre de l'Hospital, I'm trying, President of Brittany, and C, to bring trial the very high and very powerful Lord Gilles de Lavelle, Sire de Retz, Maréchal in Grande and other places, Counselor of His Majesty the King, and Marshal of France. For as much as the said Sire de Retz has seized and caused to be seized several little children, not only 10 or 20, but 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200, and more, and has unalived and slain them inhumanly, and then burned their bodies to convert them to ashes. For as much as persevering the evil, the said Sire, notwithstanding that the powers that be are ordained of God, and that everyone should be an obedient subject to his prince, has assaulted Jean Le Ferron, subject of the Duke of Brittany, the said Jean Le Ferron being guardian of the fortress of Melamort, in the name of Geoffrey Le Ferron, his brother, to whom the said lord had made over the possession of the said place. Now please remember, please do not turn me into TikTok police or any internet police. I'm just reading this stuff, like I said, it's mid-1800s, so it's not quite up to terms with our beliefs today. I'm just doing my best to get through it. Okay, for as much as the said Sire forced Jean Le Ferron to give up to him said place, and moreover retook the lordship of Melamort, in despite of the order of the Duke and of Justice. For as much as the said Sire arrested Master Jean Rousseau, sergeant of the Duke, who was sent to him with injunctions from the said Duke, and beat his men with their own staves, although their persons were under the protection of his grace. We conclude that the said Sire de Retz homicide, in fact, and in intent, according to the first count, rebel and felon, according to the second, should be condemned to suffer corporal punishment, and to pay a fine for his possessions in lands and goods held in fief to the said nobleman, and that they should be confiscated and remitted to the Crown of Brittany. This requisition was evidently drawn up with the view of saving the life of the Sire de Retz, for the crime of homicide was presented without aggravating circumstances, in such a manner that it could be denied or shelved, whilst the crimes of felony and rebellion against the Duke of Brittany were brought into exaggerated prominence. Giles de Retz had undoubtedly been forewarned of the course which was to be pursued, and he was prepared to deny totally the charges made in the first count. Sorry, I keep bumping my mic with the hat. Sorry, guys. Monseigneur, said Pereire de Hospital. I'm trying. I'm trying. Hospital. The guy's last name is Hospital. Whom the form of the requisition had visibly astonished. What justification have you to make? Take an oath on the Gospels to declare the truth. No, monsieur, answered the marshal. The witnesses are bound to declare what they know upon oath. But the accused is never put on his oath. Quite so, replied the judge, because the accused may be put on the rack and constrained to speak the truth and please you. Giles de Retz turned pale, bit his lips, and cast a glance of malignant hate at Pierre de Hospital. Then, composing his countenance, he spoke with an appearance of calm. Messieurs, I shall not deny that I behaved wrongfully in the case of Jean Rousseau. But in excuse, let me say that said Rousseau was full of wine, and he behaved with such indecorum towards me in the presence of my servants, that it was quite intolerable. Nor will I deny my revenge on the brothers of the Farron. Jean had declared that the said Grace of Brittany had confiscated my fortress of Malamort, which I had sold to him, and for which I have yet not to receive payment. And Geoffrey Le Farron had announced far and wide that I was about to be expelled of Brittany as a traitor and a rebel. To punish them, I re-entered my fortress of Malamort. As for the other charges, I shall say nothing about them. They are simply false and not true. Indeed, explained Pierre de Hospital, whose blood boiled with indignation against the wretch who stood before him with such effrontery. All these witnesses who complained of having lost their children lied under oath. Undoubtedly, if they accuse me of having anything to do with their loss, what am I to know about them? Am I their keeper? The answer came, exclaimed Pierre de Hospital, rising from his seat in the vehemence of his emotion. However, as you solemnly deny these charges, we must question Henriette and Pontou. Henriette? Pontou? Cried the marshal, trembling. They accuse me of nothing, surely. Not as yet, they have not been questioned, but they are about to be brought into court, and I do not expect that they will lie in the face of justice. I demand that my servants be not brought forward as witnesses against their master, said the marshal, his eyes dilating, his brow wrinkling, and his beard bristling blue upon his chin. The master is above the gossiping tales and charges of his servants. Do you think, then, monsieur, that your servants will accuse you? I demand that I, a marshal of France, a baron of the duchy, should be sheltered by the slanders of small folk, whom I disown as my servants if they are untrue to their master. Messire, I see we must put you on the rack, or nothing will be got for you. Hola! I appeal to this Grace, the Duke of Brittany, and ask for an adjournment, that I may take advice on the charges brought against me, which I have denied, and which I deny still. Well, I shall adjourn the case till the 25th this month, that you may be well prepared to meet these accusations. On his way back to prison, the marshal passed Henriette and Pontou as they were being conducted to the court. Henriette pretended not to see his master, but Pontou burst into tears on meeting him. The marshal held out his hand, and Pontou kissed it affectionately. Remember what I have done for you, and be faithful, servants, said Giles de Retz. Henriette recoiled from him with a shudder, and the marshal passed on. I shall speak, whispered Henriette, for we have another master beside our poor master of Retz, and we shall soon be with the Heavenly One. The president ordered the clerk to read again the requisition of the lieutenant, that the two presumed accomplices of Giles de Retz might be informed of the charges brought against their master. Henriette burst into tears, trembled violently, and cried out that he would tell all. Pontou, alarmed, tried to hinder his companion, and said that Henriette was touched in his head, and that what he was about to say would be the ravings of insanity. Silence was imposed upon him. "I will speak out," continued Henriette, "and yet I dare not speak of the horrors which I know have taken place before the image of my Lord Christ." And he pointed tremblingly to a large crucifix above the seat of the judge. "Henriette," moaned Pontou, squeezing his hand, "you will destroy yourself as well as your master." Pierre de la Hospital rose, and the figure of a Redeemer was solemnly unveiled. Henriette, who had great difficulty in overcoming his agitation, then began his revelations. The following is the substance of them. Now, I'm going to try and clean this up as I go, okay? I don't want any issues. So if you like what you hear, double tap that screen, give me some thumbs up and all that good stuff. Help me out with donation would be nice. You know, the nice helms or whatever, that would be great. No one's required. On leaving the University of Angers, he had taken the situation of reader in the house of Gilles de Ritz. The marshal took a liking to him, and made him his chamberlain and confidant. On the occasion of the Sire de la Sue's brother of the Sire de la Ritz taking possession of the castle of Châteauneuf, Charles de Savoyen, who had arrived at Châteauneuf, assured Henriette that he had found in the oubliettes of a tower a number of dead children, some headless, others frightfully mutilated. Henriette then thought that this was but a calumny invented by the Sire de la Suze. But when, some while after, the Sire de la Ritz took the castle of Châteauneuf and ceded it to the Duke of Brittany, he one evening summoned Henriette, Pontou, and a certain Petit Robin to his room. The two latter were already deep in the secrets of their master, but before confiding anything to Henriette, de Ritz made him take a solemn oath never to reveal what he was about to tell them. The oath taken, the Sire de Ritz, addressing the three, said that on the morrow an officer of the Duke would take possession of the castle in the name of the Duke, and that it was necessary, before this took place, that a certain well should be emptied of children's corpses, yikes, and that their bodies should be put in boxes and transported elsewhere. Henriette, Pontou, and Petit Robin went together, furnished with ropes and hooks, to the tower where the bodies lay. They toiled all night removing the half-decayed bodies, and with them they filled three large cases, which they sent by boat down to Lord de Machault, where they were reduced to ashes. Henriette counted 36 children, but there were more bodies than heads. This night's work, he said, had produced a profound impression on his imagination, and he was constantly haunted with a vision of these heads rolling as in a game of skittles and clashing with a mournful wail. Henriette soon began to collect children for his master, and was present while he unalived them. They were unalived invariably in one room at Machecoul, so I'm going to call it Mosh. The marshal used to bathe in their blood. He was found making Gilles de Still, Pontou, or Henriette torture them, and he experienced intense pleasure in seeing them in their agonies. But his great passion was to welter in their blood. Please don't turn me into the TikTok police or anywhere like that. Okay, I'm just reading this stuff off. It's 1800 stuff, okay? His servants would stab a child and then let the blood squirt all over him. Okay. The room was often steeped in blood. When the horrible deed was done and the child was unalived, the marshal would be filled with grief for what he'd done, and would toss and turn, weeping and praying on a bed, or recite fervent prayers and litanies on his knees, whilst his servants washed the floor and burned in a huge fireplace the bodies of the unalived children. When the bodies were finally burned, the clothes and everything that had belonged to the little victims, an insufferable odor filled the room. But the Maréchal de Ritz inhaled it with delight. Nice guy. Henriette acknowledged that he had seen 40 children put to death in this manner, and he was able to give an account of several, so that it was possible to identify them with the children reported to be lost. It is quite impossible, said the lieutenant, who had been given the cue to do all that was possible to save the marshal. It is impossible that bodies could be burned in a chamber fireplace. It was done, for all that, Messire, replied Henriette. The fireplace was very large, both at the Hotel Suze and also at Mox. We piled up great faggots and logs. Remember? Different meanings. And laid the dead among them. In a few hours the operation was complete, and we flung the ashes out the window into the moat. Henriette remembered the case of the two sons of Hamelin. He said that, whilst the one child was being tortured, the other was on its knees sobbing and praying to God, till its own turn came. What you have said concerning the excesses of Messire de Ritz, exclaimed the Lieutenant du Procureur, seems to be pure invention, and destitute of all probability. The greatest monsters of iniquity never committed such crimes, except perhaps some Caesars of old Rome. Messire, it was the acts of these Caesars that my Lord of Brits desired to imitate. I used to read to him the chronicles of Suetonius and Tacitus, in which their cruelties are recorded. He used to delight in hearing of them, and he said that it gave him greater pleasure to unalive a child than to assist at a banquet. Sometimes he would seat himself on the breast of a little one. Okay, all right, I'm going to skip that. Sometimes he cut the throat through very gently. Yeah, I'm going to squish the details on that. That the child might languish. And he would wash his hands and his beard in his blood. Sometimes he had all the limbs chopped off at once from the trunk. At other times he ordered us to unalive the infants in trees until they were nearly dead, and then take them down. I remember having brought him 3 little girls who were asking charity at the castle gates. He bade me unalive them whilst he looked on. Andre Bricket found another little girl crying on the steps of the house at Venice because she had lost her mother. He brought the little thing, it was but a babe, in his arms to my lord, and it was unalive before him. Pontou and I had to make away with the body. We threw it down a privy in one of the towers, but the corpse caught on a nail in the outer wall, so that it would be visible to all who passed. Pontou was let down by a rope. And he disengaged it with great difficulty. Again, please don't turn me into internet police. That is just the way this stuff is written. I'm doing my best to get around it and get over the gory stuff. How many children do you estimate the Sire de Ritz and their servants have unalived? The reckoning is long. I, for my part, confess to having unalived 12 of my own with my own hand, by my master's orders, and I had brought him about 60. I knew that things of this kind went on before I was admitted to the secret, for the castle of Mox had been occupied a short while by the Sire de Lesage. My lord recovered it speedily, for he knew that there were many children's corpses hidden in a hayloft. There were 40 there, quite dry and black as coal, because they had been charred. One of the women of Madame de Ritz came by chance into the loft and saw the corpses. Roger de Brickville wanted to unalive her, but the Maréchal would not let him. Have you nothing more to declare? Nothing. I asked Pontou, my friend, to corroborate what I've said. This deposition, so circumstantial and detailed, produced on the judges a profound impression of horror. Human imagination at this time had not penetrated such mysteries of refined cruelty. Several times, as Henriette spake, the president had shown his astonishment and indignation by signing himself with a cross. Several times his face had become scarlet and his eyes had fallen. He had pressed his hand to his brow to assure himself that he was not laboring under a hideous dream, and a quiver of horror had run through his whole frame. Pontou had taken no part in the revelation of Henriette, but when the latter appealed to him, he raised his head, looked sadly round the court, and sighed. Etienne Cordelant, alas, Pontou, I command you in the name of God and of justice to declare what you know. This injunction of Pierre de Hospital remained unresponded to, and Pontou seemed to strengthen himself in his resolution not to accuse his master. But Henriette, flinging himself into the arms of his accomplice, implored him, as he valued his soul, no longer to harden his heart to the calls of God, but to bring to light the crimes he had committed along with the Sire de Riz. The lieutenant du procureur, who hitherto had endeavored to extenuate or discredit the charges brought against Giles de Riz, tried a last expedient to counterbalance the damaging confessions of Henriette and to withhold Pontou from giving way. "You have heard, Monseigneur," said he to the president, "the atrocities which have been acknowledged by Henriette, and you, as I do, consider them to be pure inventions of the aforesaid, made out of bitter hatred and envy, with the purpose of ruining his master. I therefore demand that Henriette should be put on the rack, that he may be brought to give the lie to his former statements." "You forget," replied de Hospital, "that the rack is for those who do not confess, and not for those who freely acknowledge their crimes. Therefore, I order the second accused, Etienne Corneliat alias Pontou, to be placed on the rack if he continues silent. Pontou, will you speak or will you not?" "Monseigneur, he will speak," exclaimed Henriette. "Oh, Pontou, dear friend, resist not God any more." "Well then, Monseigneurs," said Pontou, with emotion, "I will satisfy you. I cannot defend the poor lord against the allegations of Henriette, who has confessed all through dread of eternal damnation." He then fully substantiated all the statements of the other, adding other facets of the same character, known only to himself. Notwithstanding the avowal of Pontou and Henriette, the adjourned trial was not hurried on. It would have been easy to have captured some of the accomplices of the wretched man, but the Duke, who was informed of the whole of the proceedings, did not wish to augment the scandal by increasing the number of accused. He even forbade researches to be made in the castles and mansions of the Sire de Riz, fearing lest proofs of fresh crimes, more mysterious and more horrible than those already divulged, should come to light. The dismay spread through the country by the revelations already made demanded that religion and morality, which had been so grossly outraged, should be speedily avenged. People wondered at the delay in pronouncing sentence, and it was loudly proclaimed in Nantes that the Sire de Riz was rich enough to purchase his life. It is true that Madame de Riz solicited the king and the Duke again to give pardon to her husband, but the Duke, counseled by the bishop, refused to extend his authority and interfere with the course of justice, and the king, after having sent one of his counselors to Nantes to investigate this case, determined not to stir in it. Chapter XIII. I don't do Roman numerals either. The sentence and execution. A sip of water. Okay. On the 24th October, the trial of Maréchal de Retz was resumed. The prisoner entered the Carmelite habit, knelt, and prayed in silence before the examination began. Then he ran his eye over the court, and the sight of the rack, windlass, and cords made a slight shudder run through him. "Monsieur Giles de Laval," began the president, "you appear before me now for the second time to answer a certain requisition read by M. le Lieutenant de Procureur de Nantes." "I shall answer frankly, Monseigneur," said the prisoner calmly, "but I reserve the right of appeal to the benign intervention of the very venerated Majesty of the King of France, of whom I am, or have been, Chamberlain and Marshal, as may be proved by my letters patent duly registered in the Parliament of Paris." "This is no affair of the King of France," interrupted Pierre. "If you were Chamberlain and Marshal of His Majesty, you are also vassal of His Grace to the Duke of Brittany." "I do not deny it, but on the contrary, I trust His Grace of Brittany to allow me to retire to a convent of Carmelites, there to repent on my sins." "That is as may be. Will you confess, or must I send you to the rack?" Torture me not, exclaimed de Retz. I will confess all. Tell me first, what have Henriette and Pontou said? They have confessed, the lieutenant. They have confessed. The lieutenant and procureur shall read you their allegations. Not so, said the lieutenant, who continued to show favor to the accused. I pronounce them false, unless Messire de Retz confirms them by oath, which God forbid. Pierre de Hospital made a motion of anger to check the scandalous pleading in favor of the accused, and then nodded to the clerk to read the evidence. The Sire de Retz, on hearing that his servants had made such explicit avowals of their acts, remained motionless, as though thunderstruck. He saw that it was in vain for him to equivocate, and that he would have to confess all. What have you to say? Asked the president, when the confessions of Henriette and Pontou had been read. Say what befits you, my lord, interrupted the lieutenant, as though to indicate to the accused the line he was about to take. Are not these abominable lies and calumnies trumped up to ruin you? Alas, no, replied the Sire de Retz, and his face was pale as death. Henriette and Pontou have spoken the truth. God has loosened their tongues. My lord, relieve yourself of the burden of your crimes by acknowledging them at once, said de Hospital. Messieurs, said the prisoner after moments of silence, it is quite true that I have robbed mothers of their little ones, and that I have unalived their children, or caused them to be unalived, either by, we're not going to go there, but, or else I've had their skulls broken by hammer. Okay. Alright, so we're not seeing. Let's see, let me see it off. Okay, I've occasionally strangled them or put them to a slow death. And when the children were alive, I had their bodies burned and reduced to ashes. When did you begin your execrable practices? Asked Pierre, staggered by the frankness of these horrible avowals. The evil one must have possessed you. It came to me from myself, no doubt, at the instigation of the devil. But still these acts of cruelty afforded me incomparable delight. The desire to commit these atrocities came upon me 8 years ago. I left court to go to Chantilly that I might claim the property, of my grandfather deceased. In the library of the castle I found a Latin book, Suetonius, I believe, full of accounts of the cruelties of the Roman emperors. I read the charming history of Tiberius, Caracalla, and other Caesars, and the pleasure they took in watching the agonies of tortured children. Thereupon, I resolved to initiate and surpass these same Caesars, and that very night I began to do so. For some while I confided my secret to no one, but afterwards I communicated it to my cousin, Giles de Cille, then to Master Roger de Brickville, next in succession to Henriette, Pontou, Rossignol, and Robin. He then confirmed all the accounts given by his two servants. He confessed to about 120 murders in a single year, an average of 800 in less than 7 years, exclaimed Pierre de Hospital, with a cry of pain. Ah, Messieurs, you were possessed. His confession was too explicit and circumstantial for the lieutenant to say another word in his defense, but he pleaded that the case should be made over to another court, as there were confessions of invocations of the devil and of witchcraft mixed up with those of murder. Pierre de Hospital saw that the object of the lieutenant was to gain time for Madame de Retz to make a fresh attempt to obtain a pardon. However, he was unable to resist, so he consented that the case should be transferred to the bishop's court. But the bishop was not a man to let the matter slip, and there and then a sergeant of the bishop summoned Giles de Laval, Sire de Retz, to appear forthwith before the tribunal. The marshal was staggered by this unexpected citation, and he did not think of appealing against it to the president. He merely signed his readiness to follow, and he was at once conducted into the religious court and assembled hurriedly to try him. The new trial lasted only a few hours. The marshal, now thoroughly cowed, made no attempt to defend himself, but he endeavored to bribe the bishop into leniency by promises of surrender of all his lands and goods to the church, and begged to be allowed to retire into the Carmelite monastery at Nantes. His request was refused, and sentence of death was pronounced against him. TikTok, just to give you an idea, I know it sounds like a lot of noise in the background. It's 105 degrees today. I did not want to turn my air conditioning off to the show, so that's what you're hearing is my through-the-window air conditioner. On the 25th October, the religious court, having pronounced judgment, the sentence was transmitted to the secular court, which had now the pretext upon which to withhold ratification. There was some hesitation as to the kind of death the marshal was to suffer. The members of the tribunal were not unanimous on this point. The president put it to vote, and collected the votes himself. Then he reseated himself, covering his head, and said in a solemn voice, "The court, notwithstanding quality, dignity, and nobility of the accused, condemns him to be hung and burned. Wherefore I admonish you, who are condemned, to ask pardon of God, and grace to die well, in great contrition, for having committed the said crimes. And the sentence shall be carried into execution tomorrow morning, between 11 and 12 o'clock. A similar sentence was pronounced upon Henriette and Pontou. On the morrow, October 26th, at 9 o'clock in the morning, a general procession, composed of half the people of Nantes, the clergy and the bishop bearing the blessed sacrament, left the cathedral and went round the city visiting each of the principal churches, where masses were said for the three other sentence. At 11, the prisoners were conducted to the place of execution, which was in the middle of Biessy, on the further side of the Loire. 3 gibbets had been erected, one higher than the other, and beneath each was a pile of faggots, tar, and brushwood. I don't know what the first word means. Okay, I know what it means now, which I don't like. I don't know what that means as far as back in the history. Okay. I am like really choppy on my other internet feed. Let me do something real quick. It's weird. There's more of a delay over here on this side than there is. Okay. It was a glorious breezy day. Not a cloud was to be seen in the blue heavens. The Loire rolled silent towards the sea, its mighty volumes of turbid water seemingly bright and blue, as it reflected the brilliancy of color in the sky. The poplars shivered and whitened in the fresh air with a pleasant rustle, and the willows flickered and wavered above the stream. A vast crowd had assembled round the gallows. It was with difficulty that a way was made for the condemned, who came on chanting the De Profundis. The spectators of all ages took up the psalm and chanted it with them, so that the surge of the old Gregorian tone might have been heard by the Duke and the Bishop, who had shut themselves up in the chateau of Nantes during the hour of execution. After the close of the psalm, which was terminated by the Requiem Auxilium instead of the Gloria, the Sire de Ritz thanked those who had conducted him, and then embraced Pontou and Henriette before delivering himself on the following address, or rather sermon. My very dear friends and servants, be strong and courageous against the assaults of the devil, and feel great displeasure and contrition for your ill deeds without despairing of God's mercy. Believe with me that there is no sin, however great in the world, which God, in His grace and loving kindness, will not pardon when one asks of Him with contrition of the heart. Remember that the Lord God is always more ready to receive the sinner than is the sinner to ask of Him to pardon. Moreover, let us very humbly thank Him for His great love to us in letting us die in full possession of our faculties and not cutting us off suddenly in the midst of our misdeeds. Let us conceive such a love of God and such repentance that we shall not fear death, which is only a little pang, without which we could not see God in His glory. Besides, we must desire to be freed from this world, in which is only misery, that we may go to everlasting glory. Let us rejoice, rather, For although we have sinned grievously here below, yet we shall be united in paradise, our souls being parted from our bodies, and we shall be together forever and ever, if only we endure in our own pious and honorable contrition to our last sigh. Then the marshal, who was to be executed first, left his companions and placed himself in the hands of his executioners. He took off his cap, knelt, kissed a crucifix, and made a pious oration to the crowd, much in the style of his address to his friends, Pontou and Henriette. Then he commenced reciting the prayers of the dying. The executioner passed the cord round his neck and adjusted the knot. He mounted a tall stool, erected at the foot of the gallows as a last honor paid to the nobility of the criminal. The pile of firewood was lighted before the executioners had left him. Pontou and Henriette, who were still on their knees, raised their eyes to their master and cried to him, extending their arms. At this last hour, Monseigneur, be a good and valiant soldier of God, and remember the passion of Jesus Christ, which wrought our redemption. Farewell, we hope soon to meet in paradise. The skull was cast down, and the siren and wrist dropped. The fire roared up, the flames leaped about him, and enveloped him as he swung. Suddenly, mingling with the deep booming of the cathedral bell, swelled up the wild unearthly wail of dyer's ears. No sound among the crowd, only the growl of the fire and the solemn strain of the hymn. Lo, the book exactly worded, whereupon all hath been recorded. Then shall judgment be awarded. When the judge his seat attaineth, and each hidden deed reigneth, nothing unavenged remaineth. What shall I, frail man, be pleading? Who for me be interceding, when the just are mercy needing? King of majesty, tremendous, who dost free salvation send us, fountain of pity, then befriend us. Lo, I kneel, with heart's submission. See, like ashes, my contrition. Help me in my last condition. Ah, that day of tears and mourning. From dust of earth returning, man for judgment must prepare him. Spare, O God, in mercy spare him. Lord, who didst our souls redeem, grant a blessed requiem. Amen. 6 women, veiled and robed in white, and 6 Carmelites advanced, bearing a coffin. It was whispered that one of the veiled women was Madame de Ritz, and that the others were members of the most illustrious houses of Brittany. The cord by which the marshal was hung was cut, and he fell into a cradle of iron prepared to receive the corpse. The body was removed before the fire had gained any mastery over it. It was placed in a coffin, and the monks and the women transported it to the Carmelite monastery of Nantes, according to the wishes of the deceased. In the meantime, the sentence had been executed upon Pontou and Henriette. They were hung and burned to dust. Their ashes were cast into the winds, whilst in the Carmelite Church of Our Lady were celebrated with pomp the very high, very powerful, very illustrious Senior Gilles de Laville, Sire de Ritz, late Chamberlain of King Charles I and Marshal of France. Chapter XIV, A Gallican Werewolf. The inhabitants of Austrian Galicia are quiet, inoffensive people. Take them as a whole. The Jewish, who number a 12th of the population, are the most intelligent, energetic, and certainly the most money-making individuals in the province, though the Polish proper, or messieurs, are not devoid of natural parts. Perhaps as remarkable a phenomenon as any other in that kingdom, for kingdom of Waldemar was, and the enormous numerical preponderance of the nobility over the entitled. In 1837, the proportion stood thus: 32,190 nobles to 2,076 tradesmen. The average of execution for crime is 9 a year, out of a population of 4.5 millions. By no means a high figure, considering the preemptory way in which justice is dealt forth in that province. Yet, in the most quiet and well-disposed neighborhoods, occasionally the most startling atrocities are committed, occurring the least expected, and sometimes perpetuated by the very person who is the least suspected. Double tap that screen, TikTok, if you like what you see in here. Double tap that screen. Just 16 years ago, there happened in the circle of Tornau, in the western Galicia. The province was divided in 9 circles, the circumference, which will probably furnish the grand dames with a story for their firesides during their bitter Galician winters for many a long year. In the circle of Tornau, in the lordship of Parcos, is a little hamlet called Polimia, consisting of 8 hovels and a Jewish tavern. The inhabitants are mostly woodcutters, hewing down the firs of the dense forest in which their villages are situated, and conveying them to the nearest water, down which they are floated to the Vistula. Each tenant pays no rent for his cottage and pitch a field, but is bound to work a fixed number of days for his landlord, a practice universal in Galicia, and of 10 productive and often productive of much disturbance and injustice, as the proprietor exacts labor from his tenant on those days when the harvest has to be got in, or the land is in best condition for tillage, and just when the peasant would be gladly engaged upon his own small plot. Money is scarce in the province, and this is, accordingly, the only way in which the landlord can be sure of his dues. Most of the villagers of the area are miserably poor, but by cultivating a little maize and keeping a few fowls or a pig, they scrape together sufficient to sustain life. During the summer, the men collect resin from the pines, from each of which once in 12 years. They strip a slip of bark, leaving the resin to exude and trickle into a small earthenware jar as roots, and during the winter, as already stated, they fell the trees and roll them down to the river. Polymasia is not a cheerful spot, nested amongst dense masses of pines, which shed a gloom over the little hamlet. Yet, on a fine day, it is pleasant enough for the old women to sit at their cottage doors, scenting the matchless pine fragrance, sweeter than the balm of the Spice Islands, for there is nothing cloying in that exquisite and exhilarating odor. Listening to the harp-like trill of the breeze in the old gray treetops, and knitting quietly at long stockings, whilst their little grandchildren romped in the heather and tough fern. Towards evening, too, there is something indescribably beautiful in the firwood. The sun dives among the trees and paints their boles with patches of luminous saffron, or falling over a level clearing glorifies it with orange dye, so visibly contrasting with the blue-purple shadow on the western rim of the unreclaimed forest. Deep and luscious as the bloom on the plum. The birds then are hastening to their nests. A gerfalcon, high overhead, is kindled with sunlight, capering and gamboling among the branches. The merry squirrel skips home for the night. The sun goes down, but the sky is still shining with twilight. The wildcat begins to hiss and squall in the forest. The heron to flap hastily by, the stork on the top of the tavern chimney to poise itself on one leg for sleep. Too-hoo, and all begins to wake up. Hark, the woodcutters are coming home with a song. Such is Polynesia in summertime, and much resembling it are the hamlets scattered about the forest, at intervals of a few miles, in each the public house being the most commonest and best-built edifice. The church, whenever there is one, not remarkable for anything but its bulbous steeple. You would hardly believe that amidst all this poverty, a beggar could have picked up any substance, and yet, a few years ago, Sunday after Sunday, there sat a white-bearded venerable man at the church door, asking alms. Poor people are proverbially compassionate and liberal, so that the old man generally got a few coppers, and often some good women bade him come into their cottage and let him have some food. Occasionally, Swiatek, that was the beggar's name, One is brown, selling small pitchpick ornaments and beads, generally, however, only appealing to charity. One Sunday after church, a Missouri and his wife invited the old man into their hut and gave him a crust of pie and some meat. There were several children about, but a little girl of 9 or 10 attracted the old man's attention by her artless tricks. Swiatek felt in his pocket and produced a ring, enclosing a piece of colored glass set over the foil. This he presented to the child, who ran off delighted to show her acquisition to her companions. "Is that little maid your daughter?" asked the baker. "No," answered the housewife. "She is an orphan. There was a widow in this place who died, leaving the child, and I have taken charge of her. One mouth more, one mouth more will not matter much, but the good God and the good God will bless us." Aye, to be sure, he will. The orphans and the fatherless are under his own peculiar care. "She's a good little thing, and gives no trouble," observed the woman. "You go back to you go back to Palomija tonight, I reckon." "I do, ah," exclaimed Swiatek, as the little girl ran up to him. "You like the ring? Is it not beautiful? I found it under a big fir to the left of the churchyard. There may be dozens there. You must turn round 3 times, bow to the moon, and say, 'Zaboy.' Then look among the tree roots till you find one." "Come along," screamed the child to his comrades. "We will go and look for rings." "You must seek separately," said Swiatek. The children scampered off into the wood. "I have done one good thing for you," laughed the beggar, "in ridding you, for a time, of the noise of those children." "I am glad of a little quiet now and then," said the woman. "The children will not let the baby sleep at times with their clatter. Are you going?" "Yes, I must reach town tonight. I am old and very feeble and poor." He began to fall into his customary whine. "Very poor. But I thank and pray to God for you." Swiatek left the cottage, and the little orphan was never seen again. The Austrian government has, of late years, been vigorously advancing education among the lower orders and establishing schools throughout the province. The children were returning from class one day and were scattered among the trees, some pursuing a field mouse, others collecting juniper berries, and some sauntering with their hands in their pockets, whispering. "Where's Peter?" asked one little boy of another who was beside him. "We 3 go home the same way. Let us go together." "Peter!" shouted the lad. "Here I am," was the answer from among the trees. "I'll be with you directly." "Oh, I see him," said the elder boy. "There is someone talking to him." "Where?" "Yonder, among the pines." "Ah, they have gone further into the shadow, and I cannot see them any more. I wonder who was with them. A man, I think." The boys waited till they were tired, and then they sauntered home, determined to thrash Peter for having kept them waiting. But Peter was never seen again. Some time after this, a servant girl belonging to a small store kept by a Russian disappeared from a village 5 miles from the town. She had been sent with a parcel of grocery to a cottage at no very great distance, but lying apart from the main cluster of hovels, and surrounded by trees. The day closed in, and her master waited for her return anxiously. But, as several hours elapsed without any sign of her, he, assisted by the neighbors, went in search of her. A slight powdering of snow covered the ground, and her footsteps could be traced at intervals where she had diverged from the beaten track. In that part of the road where the trees were thickest, there were marks of 2 pair of feet leaving the path, but owing to the density of the trees at that spot and the slightness of the fall of snow, which did not reach the soil, were shaded by the pines, the footprints were immediately lost. By the following morning, a heavy fall had obliterated any further traces of the daylight must have discovered. The servant girl was also never seen again. During the winter of 1849, the wolves were supposed to have been particularly ravenous, for thus alone did people account for the mysterious disappearances of children. A little boy had been sent to a fountain to fetch water. The pitcher was found standing by the well, but the boy vanished. The villagers turned out, and those wolves which could be found were destroyed. We have already introduced our readers to Polynesia, although the occurrences above related did not take place among those 8 hovels, but in the neighboring villages. The reason for our having given a more detailed account of this cluster of houses, rude cabins, they were and will now become apparent. In May 1849, the innkeeper of, of Polynesia, why am I having a problem with that word? Polynesia, missed a couple of ducks, and his suspicions fell upon the beggar who lived there, and whom he held in no esteem, as he himself was a hard-working, industrious man, while Switek maintained himself, his wife, and children by mendicity, although possessed of sufficient arable land to yield an excellent crop of maize and produce vegetables if tilled with the ordinary care. As the publican approached the cottage, a fragrant whiff of roast greeted his nostrils. "I'll catch the fellow in the act," said the innkeeper to himself, stealing up to the door, and taking good care not to be observed. As he threw open the door, he saw the mendicant hurriedly shuffle something under his feet and conceal it beneath his long clothes. The publican was on him in an instant, had him by the throat, charged him with theft, and dragged him from his seat. Judge of his sickening horror when from beneath the pauper's clothes rolled forth the head of a girl about the age of 14 or 15 years old, carefully separated from the trunk. In a short while, the neighbors came up. The venerable Switek was locked up along with his wife, his daughter, a girl of 16, and a son, aged 5. The hut was thoroughly examined, and the mutilated remains of the poor girl discovered. In a vat were found the legs and thighs, partially raw, partly stewed or roasted. In a chest were the heart, liver, and entrails, all prepared and cleaned as neatly as though done by a skillful butcher. And, finally, under the oven was a bowl full of fresh blood. On his way to the magistrates of the district, the wretched man flung himself repeatedly on the ground, struggled with his guards, and endeavored to suffocate himself by gulping down clods of earth and stones, but was prevented by his conductors. When taken before the protocol at Davkow, he stated that he had already killed and assisted by his family 6 persons. His children, however, asserted most positively that the number was much greater than he had represented, and their testimony is borne out by the fact that the remains of 14 different caps and suits of clothes, male as well as female, were found in the house. The origin of this horrible and depraved taste was as follows, according to Switek's own confession. In 1846, 3 years previous, a Jewish tavern in the neighborhood had been burned down, and the host had himself perished in the flames. Switek, while examining the ruins, had found the half-roasted corpse of the publican among the charred rafters of the house. At that time, the old man was craving with hunger, having been destitute of food for some time. The scent of the sight of roasted flesh inspired him with an uncontrollable desire to taste of it. He tore off a portion of the carcass and satiated his hunger upon it. And at the same time, he conceived such a liking for it that he could feel no rest till he had tasted again. Hang on, let me move this thing. Oh, stupid verification. Where am I? Okay. His second victim was the orphan above alluded to. Since then, that is, during the period of no less than 3 years, he had frequently subsisted in the same manner, and had actually grown sleek and fat upon his frightful meals. The excitement roused by the discovery of these atrocities was intense. Several poor mothers who had bewailed the loss of their little ones felt their wounds reopened. Popular indignation rose to the highest pitch. There was some fear lest the criminal should be torn to pieces themselves by the enraged people as soon as he was brought to trial, but he saved the necessity of precautions being taken to ensure his safety, for, on the first night of his confinement, he hung himself from the bars of the prison window. Okay, we're going to stop there because the new chapter starts, because we started at 6:07. So I'm going to stop there till next week. We will continue this. Like I said, we should have 1 or 2 more days of reading left in this book. Great book, one of the best werewolf books I have ever read. And I saw some reviews written on this too, where a lot of people agreed that this book was one of the best books ever written. Very thorough. The guy's very educated. Okay, tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, we're back on track with Barry Strom is going to be with us, and he's going to be talking about communicating with historical figures, and he has a book out on this, and so we're going to be discussing that with him and a few other things of how he communicates and where all this started for him. For you guys on TikTok, you can check that out 6:30 p.m. Pacific, youtube.com/ at California Haunts Radio. We do our regular show. Like I said, we do a book reading on Sundays, and then Monday through Friday, we do regular paranormal shows, for different paranormal topics. So I want to invite you guys over for that. In the meantime, if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are equal opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. We're just trying to get the word out about our show. That's all. Trying to spread the joy of the show and get people involved in it, because it's a pretty darn good show. So I want to thank everybody on TikTok. I will see you next week, or maybe even during the week. We'll see how that goes. But thank you for coming, and have a great rest of your day. And for all of you guys, God, I didn't have a lot of people watching today. Barely anybody. It's the holiday weekend, I guess. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming today. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. for Barry Strom. Have a great evening, everybody, and I can say it like Elvira. Listen to it like Elvira. Unpleasant dreams. Bye.